Take picture. Stop recording video. Button. Swipe up or down to select a custom action. Then double. Start burst. Activate. Take picture. Stop recording video. Button.
All right.
One face
Oh,
image.
hello. Let me turn the
Here,
speech
button
off. Hold on.
Speech off.
All right. Howdy, folks. Let's try this again. Whoa. I did this yesterday, and I don't know if it was my fault or the phones. I'm going to blame myself because I think it was kind of me. But I did this volume and about half the next. It was like an hour and a half, 2 hours worth of reading. And I turned off the video, and the video didn't save. I wasn't too pleased about that. Anyway, we're back in the exact same position we were yesterday, complete with the cup of peppermint tea. Luckily, that's not the same one, because that would be kind of disgusting. Tastes pretty good, though. Anyway, let's get this show on the ROAD. Hopefully all's well with the world. Happy October. Not a whole lot going on around these parts lately. I did laundry today and cut the back lawn. Even though it was kind of wet, there was a lot of leaves, so I said heck with it and broke out the mower. Anyway, we're back with Diary of a Wimpy Kid, The Long Haul, H-A-U-L, not H-A-double-L, because it's not a book about a long hallway. But anyway, we are here, whether we like it or not. Well, I don't mind, but I guess you don't either if you're still listening. Anyway, enough rambling, right? Right. So, Diary of a Wimpy Kid, The Long Haul by Jeff Kinney, read by me. And we're picking it up on Sunday. So, Sunday. Last night, we couldn't watch TV or do anything in the room because Manny was asleep on the pull-out sofa. Mom wouldn't even let us keep the light on, so we all sat in the dark for a while until me and Roderick decided to go down to the pool to kill some time. Well, the sign outside the pool said outside the motel said there was a pool, but there was no actual water in it. And it didn't look like there had been for at least 5 years. Brackety gizmo thing. The pool is stained with patches of mold and brackety thing. There was a hot tub near the pool that did have water in it, but some family was already using it. So me and Roderick waited our turn. Captiony bracket thing. The hot tub is full of bubbles, and there are kids having a great fun in there while their parents relax in the corners. The sign on the side says, 15-minute limit. Greg and Roderick sit on chairs and stare at the family and brackety thing. Unfortunately, the family couldn't take a hint that we wanted to use the hot tub, so eventually, me and Roderick just went back to the room. The lights were still out, and Mom and Dad were asleep on the mattress. I guess they must have been pretty exhausted because they were still wearing all of their clothes. Brackety thing. Mom and Dad are flat out on the bare mattress. End brackety thing. With Mom and Dad on the bed and Manny on the sofa, it didn't leave a lot of good sleeping options for me and Roderick. We checked out the closet for a cot or an air mattress, but there was nothing. Roderick was one step ahead of me, though. He gathered up the sofa cushions and made a bed for himself on the floor. 5 seconds later, he was out cold. I figured the closet was as good a place as any for me to sleep, so I got some towels out of the bathroom and laid them on the floor. After lying there for a minute, I noticed a terrible smell and thought a mouse must have died in the vent or something. I tried covering my nose with a washcloth, but that seemed to make the smell even worse. It was hard enough trying to fall asleep under these conditions, but then someone in the room started snoring. Luckily, I was prepared for that. Mom and Dad both snore, which is the reason I thought ahead and brought earplugs on the trip. But it was so dark in the room, I could only find one of my earplugs in my duffel bag, so I had to try sleeping with one earplug in my left ear and my other ear pressed to the floor. I did actually fall asleep for a few minutes, but woke up to some kind of ruckus going on outside. Brackety thing. From outside, there's a loud crash. Greg opens bleary eyes, and brackety thing. When I looked out the peephole, I saw something flash by, but I couldn't tell what it was. So, I cracked open the door to see what was going on. It turns out those kids from the hot tub had gotten their hands on a cleaning cart and were racing it and crashing it into the wall. Brackety thing. The cart rumbles by, the kids hanging off it and whooping, whoop! Similar to that, probably. And brackety thing. Kids! Woohoo! I couldn't believe those kids' parents were letting them run wild in the middle of the night. So, I stepped out of the room and went over to give them a piece of my mind. The littlest kid burst into tears and ran into his room, and I didn't feel bad for even 1 second. But a minute later, his door opened again, and his father came out. Brackety thing. The father's a big burly man with a big bushy beard and covered in hair like a gorilla, and brackety thing. I wasn't about to get yelled at by a grown man in his underwear, so I ran back into our room and locked the door. Then, I prayed with all my might that the chain lock was strong enough to keep him out. Brackety thing. Greg is pressed against the door, sweating with fear, and brackety thing. I guess the kid's dad didn't see which door I went into because he knocked on the wrong one. Then he pounded on the door right next to ours before giving up and going back to his own room. Brackety thing. The next door is answered by a puzzled, sleepy old lady, and brackety thing. Once the coast was clear, I hung a little sign on our doorknob in case the guy decided to come back. Do not disturb. It was hard falling asleep after that, because every time I heard someone outside the door, I held my breath until they passed by. Before I knew it, the sun was up, and so was Manny. Mom turned on the television, and whenever Manny watches TV, he talks to it. Brackety thing. Greg stirs, blinking with exhaustion, and brackety thing. TV. What sound does a duck make? Manny. Quack, quack. I was a little annoyed with Manny blabbering away, but I guess I couldn't complain. I used to do the same exact thing when I was younger. One time, when I was watching my favorite show, the host asked a question. Brackety thing. Little Greg is playing with his toys, not really paying much attention, and brackety thing. TV host. What should I draw on this box? Greg. I don't know. Polka dots. I was goofing around when I answered, but the guy on the TV actually responded. TV host. Okay, polka dots it is. Brackety thing. Little Greg practically falls off his chair with amazement, and brackety thing. I wish it never happened though, because for a long time after that, I thought the people inside the TV could hear everything I said. TV host. And how are you today, Greg? I could be better. My brother Roderick, TV host. That's great. In fact, on my 6th birthday, Mom had to sit me down and have a talk about the difference between imaginary friends and real friends. Brackety thing. Little Greg is talking directly to a teddy bear on the TV. Mom looks worried, and bracket. Greg. Hey, did you happen to see what my parents got me? It's a bike, isn't it? Blink once for yes, and twice for no. Once Manny got going in a conversation with his favorite TV characters this morning, I knew there was no point in trying to fall back asleep, so I just got up for the day. And when I did, I found the source of the awful smell. Roderick had put his shoes in the closet, and I had spent the whole night breathing in his fumes. But even worse was the washcloth I had used to block the smell was actually one of Roderick's socks. Brackety thing. Greg, kneeling in the closet, looks at the offending items with horror. And brackety thing. Speaking of Roderick, Manny's conversation with the TV didn't bother him one little bit because he was just sleeping right through it all. TV. Can you hop like a frog? Manny. Bounce, bounce, bounce. Hop, hop. Whoop, whoop. Roderick. Z, Z, Z. Dad was getting a little restless, waiting for everyone to get going this morning. He's one of those guys who gets up every day at the crack of dawn so he can arrive at his office early rather than late. So this whole late start thing wasn't really working for him. Eventually, Mom made Roderick get up and take a shower. We went to a diner right next to the motel for breakfast, then got back in the van. Mom said that from now on, we were all going to be on the same sleep schedule, so we wouldn't waste any more time on our trip. But before she was even done talking, Manny passed out in his car seat. Brackety thing. Manny. Z, Z, Z. And brackety thing. Mom's big plan for the day was for us to go to the country fair. She read about it in Family Frolic. I'd never been to anything like that before, but it looked like it was worth checking out. Highway 1. "130th Annual Country Fair. Thing for family fun. Food, contest, prizes." The fair was a few hours away, so that meant me being cramped in the back seat again, which was starting to get old. Thankfully, after an hour, Mom offered to switch places with me. When I got up to the front seat, I couldn't believe how much room there was up there. Brackety thing. Greg sits back with his feet up on the dashboard. And brackety thing. Greg. With satisfaction. And it wasn't just the space that was awesome. I even had individual temperature settings. And my own cup holder. I went to change the radio station, but Dad stopped me. He said only the driver gets to pick the music. I didn't think that was fair, but I wasn't going to complain and risk getting sent to the back seat again. Brackety thing. Dad smiles and taps his fingers to the music. Everyone else looks a bit glum, except for Manny, who's still asleep. And brackety thing. Radio. My truck is busted, but my dog, he loves me. Dad's music was pretty awful, but the view totally made up for it. When you're in the back, you don't have any sense of what's ahead. Sitting up front, I had a whole new perspective and could almost see why Mom was so gung-ho about taking this road trip. When we took the exit for the country fair, we came to a stoplight. We were behind a minivan that was the same exact model as ours, only purple. The kids in the van looked kinda familiar. It took me a second to realize they were the same ones from last night. I hadn't told Mom and Dad about the incident with the kids and the cleaning cart because I was worried I wouldn't come out looking too great. And they definitely didn't need to know about my run-in with Mr. Beardo. The kids in the purple van recognized me right away and started making obnoxious faces. I wasn't just going to sit there and take that from those little punks, so I made a face at them. The skinny one made the same face back at me, and the second he did, the light turned green and they accelerated. When their van lurched forward, the little kid face planted into the back window. Brackety thing. The little kid's face splats against the window glass. And brackety thing. Dad passed them on the left, and Mr. Beardo got a good look at me. Brackety thing. The little kid's bawling his eyes out in the back of their van, while Mr. Beardo looks over at the Heffley van with a startled expression. And brackety thing. Luckily, the parking lot for the fair was only a few hundred feet up the road. Once we stopped, I wanted to stay inside until I was sure we weren't being tailed by the purple van, but it looked like we were in the clear. Manny was still asleep in his car seat, so Mom said she'd stay back with him and rest, and the rest of us could go on ahead. The fair was a lot different than I thought it was going to be. I expected it to have a Ferris wheel and a merry-go-round and stuff like that, but instead there was a bunch of tents with farm animals and booths with homemade food. We were getting kinda hungry anyway, so we went looking for something to eat. Brackety thing. There are stalls for cheesy bacon bombs and pork bellies and brackety thing. They had corn dogs and donuts and all the stuff you'd expect at a big fair, but then they had the crazy things too, like deep fried butter on a stick. I was actually glad Mom was still in the van because I was pretty sure that kind of thing didn't qualify as real food in her book. Brackety thing. Dad and the boys quickly eat their butter on a stick, constantly looking over their shoulders checking for Mom. And brackety thing. After about an hour of walking the fairgrounds, Dad went back to the car to see if Manny was awake yet, and he told me and Roderick to go explore on our own. The two of us wandered around for a while until we came across a tent where there was something big going on. It was a foulest footwear contest, and they were offering a prize for whoever had the nastiest shoe. There was a big line of people ready to submit their entries. I told Roderick he should enter because if anyone deserved to win this thing, it was him. While we were waiting in the line, me and Roderick got in an argument over who would get to keep the prize. I said we should split it 50-50 because it was my idea, but he said he should get the whole thing because it was his shoe and he was the one who made it stink. Right before we got to the judging table, we reached a compromise where I'd get 10% of the prize as Roderick's agent. Some of the other shoes looked a lot worse than Roderick's, and I was losing confidence that he'd win. But when the judges got to the smell test, it was all over. The open brackety thing. The judges look squeamish over Roderick's shoe and brackety thing. Roderick won first prize, which turned out to be a coupon for 1 deep-fried butter on a stick. I told Roderick he could have it all to himself because the thought of eating any more butter made me feel a little bit nauseous. Roderick asked the judges for his shoe back, but they said they were going to send it on to the national competition. So that left Roderick walking around with only one shoe. I decided to explore the nearby stalls while Roderick was polishing off his stick of fried butter. I had a seriously close call when I turned a corner and almost ran smack into the entire Beardo family. Luckily, I was able to duck for cover just in time. Brackety thing. Greg hides behind a hay bale, and brackety thing. Now that I knew the Beardos were on the fairgrounds, I was eager to get out of there. I went to look for Roderick, but he must have gone back to the van. I decided to head there myself, but on my way out, I spotted the top of Mom's head in a crowd under one of the livestock tents. People were packed shoulder to shoulder, and I tried to push my way through to get to where Mom was. But when I got halfway in, a big cheer went up. Crowd, hooray! When I finally made it up to the front, I was surprised to see Manny standing in the middle of the crowd holding a piece of paper. Apparently, there was a contest to see who could come the closest to guessing the weight of a hog, and Manny got it exactly right. Brackety thing. Mom looks very pleased with their success, and brackety thing. The prize for guessing the hog's weight was a real live baby pig. Brackety thing. Mom looks a bit uncertain when the smiling judge tries to hand over the little pig, and brackety thing. Mom explained to the judge that they just entered the contest for fun and didn't actually want the pig, but the people in the crowd seemed kind of insulted and wouldn't take no for an answer. Brackety thing. The crowd look ominous, and the judge looks downright angry. Mom and Greg look a bit scared, and brackety thing. With all the commotion this was causing, I was nervous that the Beardo family was going to come over to the livestock tent to see what was going on. Luckily, by then, Mom seemed ready to get out of there herself, and we made our way to the exit. Dad was sitting in the van with the air conditioning cranked up, and when he saw Mom carrying a pig, he was a little taken by surprise. Mom filled Dad in on how Manny won the pig in the contest, but he didn't seem too thrilled with the news. Brackety thing. Dad looks aghast, and brackety thing. Dad said that we had no business owning a pig so we needed to take it back to the fair immediately. But Mom said it was too late because the pig had already imprinted on Manny. Brackety thing. Manny and the pig are sitting on the floor, staring at each other with little heart shapes filling the air between them. And brackety thing. Dad still wasn't on board, though. He said a pig is a barn animal and could be carrying all sorts of parasites and whatnot. But Mom said a lot of people keep pigs as pets, and she'd heard they were as smart as dogs. Then Roderick got in on the conversation. He voted for keeping the pig because he said that we could get fresh bacon from it every morning, the way you get eggs from a chicken. So, either he doesn't understand how pigs work, or he just wasn't thinking it all the way through. Brackety thing. Roderick imagines the pig serving him at the table with a plate of bacon. And brackety thing. I was all in favor of keeping the pig if it meant we could hurry up and get going. I noticed a purple van parked a few spots away from ours, and I was nervous that the Beardos would show up any second. Dad finally caved in. He said if we were gonna keep the pig, it would have to ride in the boat, but Mom said putting the pig in the boat was inhumane, and that we needed to find a place for it in the van. The thing is, there wasn't anywhere to put the pig in the van. We couldn't just let it roam free, and we couldn't exactly strap it in with a seatbelt either. So, Mom emptied out the cooler and put the pig in there. Once that was settled, we finally pulled out of the parking lot. After we put a few miles between us and the fair, I could finally breathe again. But the pig started causing trouble right away. By the time we got back on the highway, it had tipped over the cooler and was rooting around in one of the mommy meal bags. I had to wrangle the pig back into the cooler, and this time I strapped the belt around it so it wouldn't tip over again. Mom figured the pig was hungry, so she said we needed to stop and get it some food. Her idea was for us to go to a restaurant and then give the pig our leftovers. That sounded like a good deal to me, since it meant we'd actually get to have a sit-down meal. We found a little place to eat a few miles away, and Mom stayed back in the van with the pig while the rest of us went inside. But when the waitress saw Roderick was only wearing his one shoe, she said she couldn't serve him. Brackety thing. A sign on the counter says, "No shirt, no shoes, no service," and brackety thing. Dad said that me and Roderick could take turns using my shoe, but I wish I hadn't let Roderick go first, because he's the world's slowest eater. Brackety thing. Roderick chews slowly and pokes the food around on his plate, ignoring Greg, who is pounding on the window outside, and brackety thing. When we got back in the van, we gave the pig our leftovers, corn and vegetables, which it ate straight off the styrofoam container. Mom started looking up places to stay for the night on the GPS. She asked Roderick to call a hotel to see if they had any rooms available. They did, but Roderick blew it by getting too specific. Brackety thing. Roderick covers the mouthpiece of the phone to speak to Mom. And brackety thing. Roderick, they say no pigs. Mom found another place a few miles away from, and this time she did the talking. The hotel was just after the tolls. A few hundred feet from the exit, traffic came to a crawl. That was a problem for me because I had 2 big glasses of lemonade at the restaurant and really needed to use the bathroom. I spotted a petrol station up ahead and asked Mom and Dad if I could hop out and use the bathroom, then catch up with the car after I was done. Dad didn't like the idea because he was worried that by the time I got back, they'd already be through the toll booth. By now, it was pretty obvious the pig needed to go too, because it was running in little circles inside the cooler. Mom said I could use the bathroom at the petrol station as long as I brought the pig with me. So, I tucked it under my arm and ran across 3 lanes of traffic to the petrol station. I tried the handle on the men's room, but it was locked. I waited for the person using it to come out, but whoever was in there wasn't in any rush to wrap things up. Brackety thing. Greg, with legs crossed, is knocking frantically on the restroom door, and brackety thing. I was getting kinda desperate, so I tried the handle to the woman's room, but that was locked too. I ran back to the car, which was only moved forward about 5 feet in the time I was gone. When I told Mom that both bathrooms were occupied, she said petrol station bathrooms are always locked and that I had to ask the attendant for the key. So I ran back to the petrol station and told the guy at the desk I needed to use the restroom. In a hurry, brackety thing. The guy looks at the pig, baffled, and brackety thing. I'm not sure what I was expecting from the petrol station bathroom, but it was actually a lot worse than I could have even imagined, brackety thing. The bathroom is dreadful. There is a There's graffiti all over the walls, toilet paper strewn across the floor, and a broken bottle. The toilet is filthy, with a puddle of urine around the base. And there's a huge hole in the wall beneath the sink and brackety thing. Let me just say it was pretty awkward using the toilet with a farm animal staring right at me. But the pig was even more embarrassed than I was, because when it was the pig's turn to go, nothing happened. After I gave the key back to the attendant, I spotted our van just as it was about to go through the toll booth. So I sprinted across the way across the traffic to get to it just in time. But before I opened the door, I wish I noticed that the van didn't have a boat attached to it. Brackety thing. Greg opens the van door to find two girls sitting in the back seat, and brackety thing. Girls screaming, "Ah!" Our van was actually still a few cars back, and by the time I got inside, the pig looked like he was about to burst. I guess Mom was right about pigs being smart, because when I put him on Manny's potty seat, he knew exactly what to do. Brackety thing. The pig looks delirious with relief. Ah. And brackety thing. Pig. Oink, oink. Monday. When we pulled up to the hotel last night, I was relieved that it looked a lot nicer than the place we stayed at the night before. Mom and Dad weren't taking any chances on getting turned away at the desk because of the pig, so we kept it in the cooler until we got into our room. I think Mom felt bad about the sleeping situation at the motel the first night, because this time she rented 2 rooms so everyone would have a bed. But I should have known there was a catch. Mom said since she and Dad had Manny in their room, the pig was going to have to stay in ours. I didn't know what I was supposed to do with the pig, so I tried putting it in our bathtub, but it started whimpering the second I set it down. I decided to let the pig loose in the bathroom, but when I peeked inside a few minutes later, it had made a terrible mess in there, and I'm pretty sure it ate a bar of soap too. Brackety thing. The shower curtain has been torn down, toilet rolls are strewn across the floor, the bin has been knocked over, and the pig is in the sink, hiccuping bubbles, brackety thing end. I let the pig free in the bedroom so I could keep an eye on it. But the first thing it did was go straight to the door connecting the 2 rooms, brackety thing. The pig scratches frantically at the connecting door, and brackety thing. Eventually, Dad got sick of all the noise and opened the door to let the pig in, brackety thing. The pig bounces joyfully across the room straight to Manny, end brackety thing. I was so tired I fell asleep before my head hit the pillow. This morning I woke up to the sound of weird noises coming from the foot of my bed. At first I thought Roderick had got up early, but then I realized the sound was coming from the pig. Pig, gobble, chomp, chew. It had somehow figured out how to open the minibar door and was rooting through the candy and other snacks inside there. I picked the pig up and put it in our bathtub, then went next door to tell Mom and Dad what happened. But it turns out the pig had raided their minibar too. Brackety thing. Mom and Dad, looking bleary-eyed, are staring at the snacks and drinks on the floor, and brackety thing. Somehow, it had even gotten into the drinks. I counted at least 3 empty cans on the floor, and don't even ask me how the pig managed to do that, brackety thing. The pig is sitting among the debris, looking a bit silly. Oh, sorry, a bit tippy and brackety thing. Dad went to the front desk to tell them our pet had gotten into the minibar and we couldn't be charged for all the stuff it ate. But the clerk told Dad we were gonna have to pay for the stuff from the minibar, and on top of that, there was a $50 penalty for violating the hotel's no pet policy. After the final tally, the pig ended up costing us more than the room did. Mom was eager to get on the road, so she woke Roderick up and told him to get in the shower. But I probably should have mentioned to him that the pig was in the bathtub before he stepped in. Roderick from the bathroom. Scream! Wow! What's that? When we got in the car, Dad was on the phone with his office. Apparently there was some sort of emergency that he was the only one who knew how to take care of it. Mom had planned a big day for us with lots of stops, so she wasn't too happy that Dad had to deal with a work situation. But we hit the road anyway, and Dad talked on the phone while he drove. Our first stop was a place that claimed to have the largest piece of popcorn in the world, which ended up not being that impressive. First of all, it wasn't real popcorn. It was a wood carving. And second, it wasn't even all that big. When we got out of the car, Dad stayed back on his call. The pig stayed too, sleeping off the drinks from the minibar. Brackety thing. The family have a souvenir photo taken which shows Roderick, Greg, Manny, and Mom holding Flat Stanley next to the display stand with a piece of popcorn which is about the size of a person's head. Mom is the only one smiling. Across the top of the photo it says, "Greetings from the home of the world's largest popcorn kernel," and brackety thing. Next we went to a place that's supposedly world famous because it has life-size carvings of all the US presidents in butter. This time, Mom made Dad get out of the van and join us, but he stayed on the phone the whole time, brackety thing. Roderick can't resist poking the carving of Lincoln behind him. Manny licks Washington's foot. Mom is busy looking annoyed at Dad and brackety thing. When we got back in the car, Mom let Dad know it wasn't okay for him to be missing out on all our family time. Dad told her he was just needed to deal with one more work issue, and after it was taken care of, he'd give us his full attention. Dad said he was about to get a call from one of his international clients, and that when he did, it was really important for everyone to stay quiet so it would seem like Dad was in his office. It didn't look like that was going to happen. It didn't look like that was going to be a big deal. Manny was already down for his afternoon nap, and the pig was still passed out in the cooler. A few minutes later, Dad's call came in. You could tell by how loud the guy was talking that he was upset, but Dad spoke in an even tone, and his client seemed to calm down. The rest of us stayed as quiet as we could, but then Roderick got one of his packs of bubble gum and put all 5 pieces in his mouth and started chewing really loud. Mom snapped her fingers to try to get him to stop making so much noise. But her finger snapping was actually louder than the gum chewing, which you could tell was irritating Dad. Mom wanted Roderick to get rid of his gum, so he pressed the button to open the sunroof, but when she did, the sound of air blowing inside the van was so like a jet turbine brackety thing. Dad is looking more and more stressed and brackety thing. Mom realized that she made a mistake, so she pressed the button to close the sunroof. But before it shut all the way, Roderick chucked his gum through the opening. The gum boomeranged right back and got stuck in the gear track of the sunroof. Mom frantically pressed the close button, but the sunroof was jammed open. At the moment, the air was rushing in from outside, dislodged Flat Stanley from the vent, and he went flying. Dad was having a really hard time concentrating on his call and was fumbling with the buttons to try to shut the sunroof himself. But now he didn't have a hand on the wheel and was steering with his knees. Dad started drifting out of his lane, and the driver of a huge tractor trailer let us know he wasn't pleased and made Dad drop his phone. Tractor trailer. Honk! The horn also startled Manny, and his dummy popped out of his mouth and fell onto the floor. Manny was sucking air like he still had his dummy in his mouth, and I knew we had about 10 seconds to find it before a full-on tantrum started. Manny. Suck, suck. Slurp. I spotted the dummy on the floor in front of me and tried to unfasten my seatbelt so I could reach it, but instead I accidentally unbuckled the seatbelt holding the cooler in place. Dad was trying to reach for his phone at the same time, and he swerved the car to the left, which made the cooler tip over. Brackety thing. The pig is dumped onto the floor. Sploosh. And brackety thing. Now, it was total chaos. The pig was loose, Manny was crying, and Dad was cursing because he couldn't reach his phone. But the main problem was the pig. It was going bananas, running around on the floor and squealing like crazy. Everyone was trying to grab it, but the pig was too slippery. Then, all of a sudden, the pig went quiet, and when he popped back up, we knew why, brackety thing. The pig is sucking on Manny's dummy. The whole front of its face looks like a big, open, toothy mouth with a pair of eyes and ears on top, and brackety thing. I reached out real slow and plucked Manny's dummy out of the pig's mouth, and that's when it bit me. Pig. Chomp! Greg. Ow! I guess the pig decided this was its chance to make a run for it. It hopped up on Manny's seat and tried to squeeze through the window, which was open a crack. The pig managed to get its head and front legs out of the window and would have made it all the way if Mom hadn't jumped over her seat and grabbed its hind legs. But when she lunged for the pig, she kicked a button on the stereo, and now we had the Spanish CD blaring at full volume. CD. Por favor, habel despacio, pig. The whole time, Dad was swerving all over the place. Eventually, Mom got the pig back inside and closed Manny's window. Dad managed to put the van over on the side of the road and turn off the stereo. It was quiet in the car for a full minute while everyone caught their breath. Dad was really mad that he'd messed up his business call, and he let us know it. But he probably should have made sure his phone was off first, because he put it to his ear. His client was still on the other end. Speaking of ends, we've run out of volume there. So we're on to book 3 of the 4. Okay, hold on. I'm going to find where we start. Diary of a Wimpy Kid, The Long Haul, June, continued. Tuesday. After Dad's work call disaster yesterday, he and Mom had a long talk outside the car. Then they got back in and we drove in silence for a while. Half an hour later, we pulled up into a parking lot of a petting zoo. Mom opened the door and took the cooler with the pig in it out of the van. Mom went inside, and 5 minutes later, she came out with an empty cooler. Personally, I wasn't sad to see the pig go, but Manny was a different story. Brackety thing. Manny is bawling his eyes out in the backs of the car, and brackety thing. I'm not so sure Mom was doing the petting zoo any favors by donating a pig that bites kids. And speaking of which, my finger was really killing me. Dad said the pig probably hadn't had any immunizations. And might even have rabies, which was not what I wanted to hear. I've seen enough horror movies to know that when a person gets bitten by an animal, nothing good comes of it. The last thing I need is to turn into some kind of werepig, because that really would mess up my dating life. Brackety thing. A girl is leading Greg by the hand to a bench outside. Chez Henri. Greg looks mortified as a curly pig's tail goes springing out of the seat of his trousers. And brackety thing. Girl, there's a full moon tonight. Greg, really? I hadn't noticed. Mom took a look at my finger, and I could tell she was a little worried. She said we should find a doctor to check it out, which didn't calm my nerves any. Mom tried to find an emergency care place on GPS, but there was nothing within 50 miles radius of us. But she did find a veterinarian's office 5 minutes up the road. She said a veterinarian would have the same stuff as a regular doctor, but a vet could actually be better because they might know a thing or two about pig bites. I honestly thought Mom was joking around about the veterinarian thing, but she was dead serious, and a few minutes later, we pulled into the parking lot. Mom talked to the receptionist at the front desk while the rest of us waited on a bench. A minute later, Mom came back with a clipboard and some paperwork to fill out. All I can say is I hope this stuff doesn't get filed on my permanent record, because if it crops up later in life, it could be a little embarrassing. Emergency pet care patient registration. Pet's name, Greg. Owner's name, Susan Heffley. Species, human. Last vaccination, January 12th. History of worms? Yes. As a toddler. Last rabies shot? N/A. Spay/neutered? No. Once Mom handed the forms back into the receptionist, told me I could sit with the other patients to wait for the doctor. You'd think I'd get some sort of priority because I'm a human being, but I got put behind a gerbil that had swallowed a cigarette and a cat that had got its face stuck in a yogurt container. When we had our dog, Sweetie, Mom had to take him to the vet a bunch of times for getting into stuff he wasn't supposed to eat, but the last time she took him, she didn't really need to. Mom had found some empty cellophane wrappers from a pack of Wimpy pies in the laundry room, and she figured Sweetie had eaten them. Apparently, chocolate is like poison to a dog, so Mom rushed him to the vet to get his stomach pumped. When Mom brought Sweetie home from the vet, she told me he had gotten into Wimpy pies. I felt kinda bad because I was the one who ate them, not the dog. And from what I've heard, getting your stomach pumped isn't a really pleasant experience. Brackety thing. Sweetie is sitting on the sofa looking very sorry for himself. End brackety thing. Greg, whispering, I owe you one. I feel like my visit to the vet was payback for the Wimpy pie incident, especially when the nurse weighed me on the same scale they use for the dogs. Brackety thing. Greg is sitting huddled up on the scales. Writing at the bottom says, doggy pounds, end brackety thing. The nurse took my temperature too, and had me hold the thermometer under my tongue for 30 seconds. When I got back to the waiting area, Roderick told me that when they take the animal's temperature, they stick the thermometer somewhere else, and they probably use the same one for all their patients. Brackety thing. Greg looks very alarmed. End brackety thing. I was worried Roderick might be right, but then I realized this information was coming from a guy who was eating gerbil pellets. Roderick. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Twice while we were waiting at the vet's, Manny bolted out of the room and headed for the front door, but both times Dad grabbed him from behind before he got too far. I think Manny was pretty mad about us leaving his pig at the petting zoo, and he was acting out. Brackety thing. Manny kicks and squirms furiously as Dad carries him back into the vet's office. End brackety thing. When I was Manny's age, I used to get mad at Mom and Dad and try to run away also, all the time. I remember once when we were in the changing room at the pool and Mom was trying to make me wear a bathing suit I didn't like. I took off running, but I wasn't really thinking about where I was going. Brackety thing. Greg runs straight outside, stark naked. All the other bathers stare at him. End brackety thing. Roderick used to run away a lot too. When he was in first grade, he'd take off every day at the same time, but he'd come back home when Mom told him his favorite TV show was on. Brackety thing. Roderick makes it to the end of the driveway before Mom calls him back. End brackety thing. When Manny tried to run away a third time today, Mom bought a retractable leash at the front desk to tie him to the chair and keep him under control. Brackety thing. Manny strains at the leash and brackety thing. Mom also got a bandage for Roderick's foot so he could start going into restaurants as a family again. Finally, the veterinarian was ready to see me, and the nurse led us into the exam room. My palms started getting sweaty because I always get a little nervous when it's time to see the doctor. I'm not a big fan of needles, and Mom knows it, so whenever I need to get a flu shot or something, Mom doesn't tell me it's coming. And by the time I figure out what's going on, it's too late. Brackety thing. Mom points out the window as the doctor creeps up behind Greg with a needle. Jab! And brackety thing. Mom, hey, is that a hot air balloon? Greg, distracted. Ow! But there weren't any shots this time. Round, Mom told the vet what had happened, and she took a look at my finger. The vet said there was nothing to worry about since the pig's teeth hadn't broken the skin. She put an antibacterial ointment on my finger just to be on the safe side and sent me on my way. I gotta say, I was pretty impressed by the whole veterinarian experience. The doctor was a no-nonsense and didn't ambush me with any needles. I figure when I get back home, I might research some veterinarians in our area. I'm not saying I'm definitely going to make the switch, but I do want to see what my options are. After the vet's dad spent some time trying to get the gum out of the sunroof with a toothpick, but it was too messy and eventually he gave up. Dad didn't like not being able to close the sunroof, so he drove around trying to find a mechanic who could fix it, but nobody he talked to would do it for us for under $100. So Dad went to a grocery store and bought some cellophane and some duct tape, and he fashioned his own sunroof. Brackety thing. Dad stretches the cellophane over the opening and tapes the sides. End brackety thing. I think Dad was pretty proud of himself for saving money on the repairs, especially when it started to rain and his homemade sunroof held up. But after a while, the cellophane started filling up with water and bulging down. There were also bugs in it. Brackety thing. The cellophane is dangling down dangerously into the car. It wobbles as the water goes back and forth. Sploosh, sloosh, and brackety thing. Eventually, the whole thing gave way, and for once, I was glad to be sitting in the back. Brackety thing. The water suddenly drops in with a big sploosh right above Roderick and Manny in the back seat. Mom and Dad get sprayed a bit too. Greg's place in the back, squashed on top of the luggage, keeps him safely out of the way. And brackety thing. We parked under an overpass and waited for the rain to clear up, while Manny and Roderick changed into some dry clothes. The trip was a total disaster up to this point, and even Mom was ready to admit it. She said it probably wasn't such a great idea to do everything according to the magazine, and that if we switch things a little, maybe we could turn the trip around. Brackety thing. Dad and the boys do not look convinced. End brackety thing. Mom said that from now on, we'd go wherever the road took us, and we'd make decisions as a family along the way. She said the rest of the trip could be like those choose your own adventure books. I always liked those books because on every page you get to make a decision that changes the story. Brackety thing. A book is a picture of a demonic looking statue with a little kitten sitting by its feet, and the following text. The ancient statue has a priceless gem in its eye socket. The inscription at the base of the statue reads, "Steal from me and perish. What do you do? If you prize the gem from the statue, turn to page 40. If you stop and pet this kitten, turn to page 23. The problem is, I never seem to make the choices that get me to a happy ending. In fact, it seems like no matter what choice I make, it's always the wrong one. When you step onto the dais to pet the kitten, the ground beneath you gives way, opening into a deep chasm. You fall to the bottom and die. Bang. Better luck next time. The end. I wasn't so sure about Mom's new approach, but I figured anything was an improvement as long as I didn't get bitten by any more pigs. After the rainstorm passed, we got back in the car and gave Mom's idea a try. When we reached our first intersection, she asked everyone if we should turn right or left or go straight. So, we held a vote. Me and Roderick voted to turn right, and that's what we did. And we got to another intersection, we voted again, and this time we turned left. We drove into this little town that had 2 restaurants, and after we voted, we went to one that ended up having the best apple pie I've ever tasted in my life. In fact, it was so good, we ordered a second one. Mom was really pleased with herself for coming up with this new approach and said she was gonna write to Family Frolic and tell them about it. The only person who wasn't having a good time was Manny, who still seemed upset about the pig. Mom kept the leash on him even while we were eating to make sure he didn't try to run away again. After lunch, Mom asked me to take Manny to the bathroom, which only had 1 toilet in it. So, I waited outside for him to do his business. Brackety thing. Greg is standing outside the restroom holding the leash with the cord leading behind the restroom door, and brackety thing. Manny was in there for a while, and I started to wonder what was taking him so long. I finally opened the door, and he was gone, brackety thing. The end of the cord has been tied around the toilet seat, and the window is open, and brackety thing. Luckily, Dad saw through the front window of the restaurant and scooped Manny up before it was too late, because it had been another minute or 2. Who knows how far he could have gone. Brackety thing. Manny is standing on the sidewalk, thumbing a lift, and brackety thing. We got back in the van and Mom strapped Manny into his car seat. When we got to a stoplight, everyone agreed that we should go left, and we waited for the light to change. When it turned green, Dad stepped on the accelerator, but a car came out of nowhere and totally ran the red light. Dad laid on the horn, but the driver just kept going. Then another car ran the light, and then another. It was like nobody even noticed the light was red. Dad was getting pretty frustrated, and when he saw a gap between two cars, he put the pedal to the floor and hung a left. We barely squeezed in front of the next car, which also ran the light. When I looked back at the car behind us, I noticed something weird. There was a little flag on either side of the hood brackety thing. The writing on each flag says funeral end brackety thing. Mom noticed the flags too, and she got really upset. She said that vehicles behind us were part of a funeral procession. She explained that driving a funeral, cars are allowed to go through red lights on their way from the church to the cemetery so they can all stick together. And now we'd gone and cut off the line of cars. Dad was getting panicky that all the cars behind our van were now following us, and he tried to shake them off our tail by making a few quick turns. It didn't work though. Dad said he was gonna get back on the highway and try to lose the cars that way, but Mom said the least we could do was lead them, people behind us, to the cemetery. So, Mom typed cemetery into the GPS, and there was one a few blocks away. Results for cemetery. Quiet Meadows, 0.5. Restful Overlook, 8.2. Peaceful View, 7.9. Pleasant Hills, 9.3. We drove through the gates and parked along the side of the path. Everyone who was following us got out of their cars, but then they seemed confused. One look at the gravestones, it was clear what had happened. Apparently, the GPS treats all cemeteries the same, and it had taken us to a pet cemetery. Brackety thing. The gravestones say Digger, Bongo, Best Cat Ever, Rex, etc. Luckily, Dad got out of there before things got ugly. Brackety thing. The van with the boat screeches away, chased by a crowd of angry mourners. End brackety thing. After escaping with our lives from the pet cemetery, everyone decided it would be best to just pack it in for the night. So we found a hotel a few miles away and got a room on the 7th floor. Dad wasn't comfortable leaving all our stuff in the van since someone could get in through the sunroof and steal whatever they wanted. So we had to take everything into the hotel. This morning, Mom wanted to keep going with the choose your own adventure plan. I was starting to wonder if it was such a great idea since it almost got us killed yesterday, but Mom was sticking with it. She grabbed a bunch of brochures from the front desk and brought them to the breakfast so we could figure out what we wanted to do for the day. Brochures. Ghost Tour. Dino Play Place. Conway Caverns. There were actually too many options and nobody could agree on what to do. Dad wanted to take an all-day guided tour of a Civil War battlefield. Mom wanted to go to the beach, and Roderick wanted to go to the Electric Guitar Museum. What looked like the most fun to me was a place called Soak Central. We went to a water park last summer, but it got rained out, so I figured this would make up for it. Brackety thing. The brochure shows a delighted boy coming down a water slide. End brackety thing. But Mom read through the brochure and said Soak Central looked artificial, and that the whole point of this trip was to avoid places like that. Since nobody could agree on anything, Mom said she was making an executive decision and that we were going to the beach. Dad didn't complain because I'm sure he was thinking that if we were going to the shore, he might actually get a chance to use his boat. I'm really not much of a beach person myself. Whenever we go to one, we bring blankets and spread it out, then sit there for a whole day, and you can't really go anywhere because you're worried someone will take your stuff or your spot. Brackety thing. The family are all crammed onto the blanket with other people close up on each side, and brackety thing. The last time we went to the beach, Dad brought the tarp he uses to cover the boat so we'd have more room for our family and all our stuff. But the tarp was at least twice the size of our old blanket, and it took up a ton of space on the beach. Not to mention the fact that it's made of plastic, so with the sun beating down on it, it was like sitting on a frying pan. Brackety thing. Greg is sweating profusely. Mom is fanning herself, and Manny and Roderick are pouring bottles of water over their heads, and Dad's foot sizzles when he steps onto the tarp. And brackety thing. It was especially embarrassing when the rest of my family went to grab lunch on the boardwalk and I had to hang back on the tarp by myself to watch our stuff. Brackety thing. A ball bounces across the vast empty tarp while Greg sits hunched on the corner in the middle. What? On the cooler in the middle. Sorry about that. So, I wasn't really excited about going to the beach, especially since I knew Dad had his boat tarp with him. The beach was a few hours away, so I decided to take a nap until we got there, and believe me, with all the junk piled up in the back of the minivan, it wasn't easy. I woke up when the van slowed down. I thought we were at the beach, but we hadn't even got to the bridge yet. It seemed like everyone had the same idea. We did, going to the beach. Brackety thing. There's a long line of cars, bumper to bumper, beeping and honking at each other. And brackety thing. When we were a quarter of a mile from the bridge, I could tell Dad was starting to get nervous. He hates bridges because, for some reason, he gets dizzy whenever he has to drive over one. The bridge to the beach is one of those kinds that is really high above the water, and I'm sure Dad wasn't looking forward to being stuck on it for the next half hour. Mom told Roderick he could drive, so we pulled over and everyone switched seats. Dad took my place in the back so he wouldn't see the bridge out the front window, and I moved to the middle seat. When Roderick got in the driver's seat, he took advantage of Dad's radio rule and blasted heavy metal music, and I could tell that wasn't helping Dad's nerves. Brackety thing. Dad just looks miserable and all squashed into the back seat. And brackety thing. We were only going about 3 miles an hour. It looked like we were going to be stuck on the bridge even longer than I thought. So I opened the bag of cheese curls Roderick bought at the grocery store. there was a seagull sitting on the bridge railing next to our minivan, and it looked right at me. I guess I kind of felt sorry for it, so I tossed a cheese curl out the sunroof. I have to say, I was pretty impressed when the seagull caught the thing in midair. I was about to throw it another one, but Mom stopped me. She said seagulls are really aggressive and giving them people food is a bad idea. She was right about the aggressive thing because 2 seconds later, the seagull was on top of our car and you could tell it wanted more food. Brackety thing. The seagull is peering in through the sunroof. Greg looks anxious. And brackety thing. Seagull. Manny's eyes popped open. End brackety thing. I threw another one at it to try to make it go away, but the seagull bobbled the cheese curl, which fell right back into the car. That's when things got bad. The seagull hopped down into the car and ate the cheese curl off the floor. For a second, everyone was in a state of shock that a seagull was actually in our van, and nobody moved a muscle. The seagull squawked a few times and then tried to fly out the way it came in, but it missed the opening by about 2 feet and smashed into the roof. Then it went completely nuts, flying around and crashing into the windows. Everyone was in a total panic, and feathers and cheese curls were flying everywhere. Brackety thing. The whole family is wide-eyed with terror amidst the chaos. End brackety thing. Mom. Ah! Seagull. Then the seagull got greedy and grabbed the bag of cheese curls off the floor, but I snagged it and held on for dear life. Everyone was yelling at me to let go of the bag, but I wasn't giving in. Finally, the seagull beat me in our tug of war and flew straight up through the sunroof, taking the cheese curls with it. But the seagull didn't get far with the bag. Brackety thing. The seagull is immediately slammed by several other seagulls fighting for the bag. The bag tears and the contents fall back through the sunroof into the van. End brackety thing. About 3/4 of the cheese curls ended up back in the minivan. And from there, it was a total nightmare. Brackety thing. The seagulls follow the cheese curls back into the van, which becomes a maelstrom of cheese curls, flying seagulls, and panicking Heffleys, crashing and thumping around in there. End brackety thing. A few of the seagulls flew up to the front, and Roderick got so freaked out, he hit the accelerator. When the birds finally cleared out and things settled down, we had a whole new problem to deal with. Brackety thing. Roderick has rammed into the car in front of us. The van is looking a bit crumpled, and the radiator is steaming and hissing. End brackety thing. Believe it or not, the people in the car we rear-ended were actually pretty nice. It was a man and his wife, and they seemed to understand that it was an accident. So they exchanged insurance information with Dad, and the police didn't even need to get involved. If anything good came of this accident, it was that it got us out of going to the beach. The bad news was that now our van wouldn't start, and we had to wait an hour for a tow truck to come. All the traffic went down to one lane, and that wasn't making us very popular with the people trying to cross the bridge. Brackety thing. People shout at them angrily and honk their horns. And brackety thing. The guy at the auto repair shop said we had cracked the radiator and it was going to take at least 4 or 5 hours to fix it. That meant we needed to find something to do for the rest of the day. When we stepped outside, I was pretty shocked to find that we were only 2 blocks away from Soak Central. This is where I wanted to go in the first place. I begged Mom to let us go. I begged Mom to let us go there while we were waiting for the van to get fixed. Mom said she would rather we did something wholesome, like go to a local library, but this time she was outvoted 4-1. So we walked to Soak Central and paid for tickets at the gate. Then we got a locker and put in all the stuff we weren't planning to wear and get wet. We changed into our bathing suits and met outside the restrooms. It was summer crowded, and there was no way we were going to find 5 lounge chairs altogether. We eventually found 1 chair with a few broken straps and dumped our towels and the rest of our stuff on it. Mom and Dad stayed back with Manny, so me and Roderick were on our own, but Mom said she wanted the 2 of us to stick together, brackety thing. Manny is straining on his leash, and brackety thing. We went to the giant wave pool first, but there was about 1 billion people in it, brackety thing. People are practically shoulder to shoulder in the water, and brackety thing. Roderick suggests we play hide and seek, but with all the people and rafts in the pool, I knew it would be impossible for the seeker to find the hider. I said to make it fair, the hider couldn't swim underwater. I didn't really trust Roderick not to cheat, but he came up with a way to make sure the hider followed the rules. Roderick got a paper placemat from the snack bar and said the hider had to keep it dry to prove he didn't go underwater. And I have to admit, I was pretty impressed he came up with that all on his own. I volunteered to be the first hider and found a spot at the far end of the pool where I knew Roderick would have trouble finding me. Brackety thing. Greg is standing in the water behind a large man in a large rubber ring, and brackety thing. What I didn't know was that Roderick had written something on the placemat before giving it to me. Unfortunately, everyone around me noticed before I did. Brackety thing. Everyone in the pool is moving away from Greg as fast as they possibly can. And brackety thing. What he wrote would have been bad enough on its own, but the misspelled words somehow made it worse. I am not wearing a bathing suit. And even more embarrassing, when the lifeguard got down from her chair and told me I had to get out of the pool. Lifeguard blowing her whistle loudly and pointing at Greg and brackety thing. Out! When it comes to Roderick, I've got to learn never to trust him, especially at water parks. Brackety thing. Brackety thing. Roderick, looking crafty, is taking a photo of Greg beneath a water tower. The water barrel is tipping over as people run for cover, and brackety thing. Roderick, smile. Greg, cheese. I was done with Roderick after the placemat thing, and didn't care if Mom said we needed to stick together or not. I left him behind and went to a water slide by myself. I hadn't realized how long the line was until I got halfway up the stairs, but by then it was too late, and the people behind me, and there were too many there. There was no turning back, so I was packed in with these people until I got to the top brackety thing. The couple above Greg are smooching heavily, end bracket. It was really hot, and people were starting to get agitated by how slowly the line was moving. Then the kid right behind me poked the lady in front of me in the butt with a pool noodle, and she thought it was me. So then I had her boyfriend to deal with. Brackety thing. The boyfriend shouts angrily right in Greg's face, and Greg looks really agitated. The kid with the pool noodle keeps well out of the way. And brackety thing. I really didn't want to get into a fight over something like this, but luckily it didn't come to that. We were at the top of the stairs, and it was time to go down the slide. Unfortunately, the raft was a 4-seater, which made things pretty awkward on the ride down. Brackety thing. The raft contains Greg, the boyfriend, the girlfriend, and the noodle kid. Things looked tense, end bracket. The slide emptied out into an area where there was a ton of rafts, which was great because it gave me a chance to hide from the woman and her boyfriend. I went round the lazy river twice to make sure I'd lost them. Brackety thing. The lazy river is full of people sitting in big rubber rings. Drifting along, Greg is barely peeping out from the center of his donut. End brackety thing. I'd had enough with the water after that, so I went back to our lounge chair to get my clothes. But the chair was gone, and all our stuff was lying in a pile on the ground. I found the rest of my family at the snack bar getting lunch and told them what had happened to our lounge chair. Mom said it wouldn't be hard to figure out who took it because of the broken straps. We spread out to look for it, and I searched the area by the wave pool. Sure enough, our lounge chair was there, but I couldn't believe who was sitting in it. Brackety thing. It's the Beardo family, end brackety thing. I don't know what the Beardos are. I don't know what odds are of running into the same people again and again, but this was starting to get ridiculous. I figured it was best to just let the Beardos have our lounge chair and not make it into a big deal. So when I caught back up with my family, I pretended I didn't have any luck finding our chair. By now, our food was getting cold, and we still didn't have anywhere to sit or eat. We eventually found a place to sit behind the snack bar, brackety thing. The family are sitting on a long bench right next to a big skip and a smelly rubbish bin with trash overflowing onto the ground, and brackety thing. Everyone seemed ready to leave after that. Mom asked for the key to the locker so she could get our stuff, but I told her I didn't have it. She said she had given me the key, but I turned both pockets of my bathing suit inside out to prove there was nothing in them. Empty. I was pretty sure she'd given the key to Roderick, but he said he didn't have it either. Everybody searched themselves for the key, but we all came up empty. This was a huge problem because Mom and Dad's phones and wallets were in the locker, so we couldn't leave until we found it. We went to an employee at the front counter and told him we had lost our key. But when he asked what our locker number was, none of us could remember. There were hundreds of them, and they all looked exactly the same. He said the locker number was written on the key, but of course, that information wasn't getting us anywhere. The guy said the only thing we could do was try to find the key, so we split up and retraced our steps across the water park. Roderick went to the wave pool where we'd played our hide and seek game, and I went to the lazy river, but didn't have any luck. Brackety thing. Greg is swimming through the debris underwater, while people in donuts drift overhead. And brackety thing. When we met back up, nobody had found the key. Mom said maybe we accidentally threw it away after we ate, so we dug through the trash area where we sat. Brackety thing. The family have tipped over the bin and are poking disdainfully through the rubbish. And brackety thing. Mom said we should all concentrate real hard and try to remember where our locker was and where we put our stuff in. When I did, I could suddenly see it clearly in my mind. Greg is picturing locker number 929, end bracket. I told Mom and we went straight to locker 929. Sure enough, it was locked and there was no key in the door. We went back to the guy at the counter to tell him which locker was ours, but we had to wait a long time before we could get his attention. Brackety thing. The guy's engrossed in chatting up two young girls. And brackety thing. When we told him our locker number, he got the master key and walked over to number 929 with us. But by the time we went there, the key was back in the slot and the locker was empty. That meant someone had found our key and stolen our stuff. Then I thought of another possibility. When the Beardos took our lounge chair, they must have taken our key too. I decided to tell Mom and Dad all about the Beardos and how they probably stole all our stuff to get some payback on me. Then I took them to the area where I last saw them sitting. But when we got there, they were gone. I was worried they might have already left the park, so I ran to the front gate, and sure enough, the purple van was just pulling away. I knew the family was bad news from the beginning, but I never thought they were capable of this. Dad used the phone at the front desk to call the police, but the cop said that without a license plate number, it would be really hard to track down our stolen stuff. If there was any good news about our situation, it was the key to the van wasn't in the locker because it was back at the mechanic's. So we walked to the auto repair shop where the mechanic was getting ready to put in the new radiator. He told Dad it was going to cost almost $300, but Dad told him he couldn't pay because his wallet got stolen. Dad told the mechanic he'd mail him a check, and the second we got home, but the guy said he couldn't take any IOUs. He said what he could do was put some sealant on the busted radiator, which would last a day or two before it wore off. But the mechanic said we'd have to run the heater inside the van so at full blast to keep the engine from overheating. He said it might sound crazy, but it actually works. And we're through another volume. That's a long day. We're going to go till this day ends. Got it. Hold on, books are falling. All right. Part 4 of 4. Mom and Dad talked it over and decided we should just drive the van all the way home. We didn't have any money or a phone, but we did have a full tank of petrol. Dad figured if we drove straight through, we'd get back about 3 o'clock in the morning. Mom seemed pretty sad the trip was getting cut short, but to be honest, I was kind of relieved. When we got in the van, Dad turned up the heat just like the mechanic told him to, and within about 30 seconds, it was 100 degrees inside the car. Mom opened all the windows up front, but it was like a furnace where I was sitting, since the windows back there didn't open. I told Mom I didn't think I could make it all the way home without dying of heat stroke, but she said I'd be fine as long as I stayed hydrated. Then she got 2 cases of water out of the boat and brought them into the van. We headed out onto the highway and I went through 4 bottles of water in the first hour. I tried to fall asleep to make the trip go faster, but I got woken up when somebody started honking their horn. The people in the car next to us were waving their arms and trying to get our attention. When I looked behind us, I was surprised to see the tarp on the boat was loose and flying around in the wind. And everything inside the boat was flying out. Cars were swerving left and right, trying to avoid our stuff flying through the air. By now, Dad had seen what was going on in the rearview mirror, and he pulled over to the side of the road. We spent the next 2 hours walking down the highway trying to recover all of our stuff, but we had to give up when it got dark. Brackety thing. The family are trudging gloomily along the side of the road with armfuls of clothes and brackety thing. Once we got back to the van, we sorted through the things we had collected. I'd say got about 2/3 of the clothes I'd packed for the trip, but Mom said there were whole bags that were missing. What was really gross was that a few of the items we picked up weren't even ours. Roderick found a pair of underwear that was stiff as cardboard. Once we got back in the car, Mom said we needed to start thinking about eating. Roderick wanted to open the package of cinnamon rolls that was still in the grocery bag, but Mom said they hadn't been refrigerated and he'd get sick after he ate them. Mom used the GPS to try to find a place to eat, but the only places that were open at that hour were fast food restaurants. And Mom was not happy about that. We ended up pulling over at a rest stop along the highway that had a fried chicken place. Since we didn't have any cash or credit cards, we had to scrounge around on the floor of the car for loose change. We came up with $3.50, which I was pretty sure wasn't even enough to get a drumstick or a thigh. Mom said maybe they had a value menu with less expensive items. So we got out of the car and walked to the restaurant. But when we got to the entrance, the doors were locked. We could see workers inside, but apparently at that hour, the only thing open was the drive-through. Brackety thing. The family stared hopelessly through the window. And brackety thing. We got back in the car and tried to enter the drive-through, but with the boat, it was too tight a squeeze, so we had to repark and go through on foot. We stood next to the menu and waited for someone to come on the speaker to take our order, but no one did. Dad said that must be some kind of sensor that could detect the weight of a car, so we did our best to trigger it. Brackety thing, the whole family except for Manny on his leash, are jumping and stomping in the drive-through lane and brackety thing. Eventually, someone inside noticed us and opened the window. Mom asked what we could get with the money we had, and the cashier said we could buy a small box of chicken nuggets and a couple of cookies. So we got that, plus a handful of barbecue sauce packets. Then we went back to the van and split the food 5 ways. We drove a half hour or so, but now it was pretty obvious we weren't gonna make it all the way home in one shot. So we were gonna have to find a place to sleep. We didn't have any money for a hotel, so Mom tried to find a campsite nearby. The closest one was 10 minutes in the opposite direction. Dad said we were just gonna have to take the next exit, find a place where we could park, and sleep in the car. I was open to just about anything as long as we could turn the heater off when we stopped. But as soon as we took the exit, it was clear we'd made a mistake. First of all, the road wasn't paved. There weren't any petrol stations or stores or even any houses. There was just trees on either side of the road, and now no streetlights. We drove for a long time, but the road was narrow and there wasn't a good place to pull over. I think everyone was getting pretty spooked, and eventually Mom told Dad he should just get back on the highway. But Dad kept saying he was positive that at any moment we were going to find a good place to stop. The further we went, though, the more nervous Mom became, and now even the GPS didn't know where we were. We saw some signs up ahead, and we all got excited that maybe we were getting back to civilization. But we were wrong, brackety thing. There are 3 signs along the side of the road. A skull and crossbones, a leaping deer in a crosshairs, and a rifleman with the words warning, hunting area, and a brackety thing. Right at that moment, when everyone's nerves were totally shot, there was a really loud noise. Bang! Dad swerved off the road and our car came to a stop in the ditch along the side of the road with the mud. My ears were ringing and I looked around to try to figure out what had happened. I expected to see broken glass everywhere, but the windows were intact and there was some kind of weird glow all over them, or weird goo all over them. Roderick had the gooey stuff on the back of his head and he was totally freaking out. I still didn't know what was going on, but then I looked in the grocery bag, which had shreds of cinnamon roll package inside. The tube had exploded because the bag was sitting right on top of one of the heating vents. But Roderick didn't know that yet. He was He had uncooked cinnamon rolls all over the back of his head, and he thought the dough was his brains. Brackety thing. Roderick looks at his hands in terror, and brackety thing. Roderick. Ah! What upset Roderick even more was that he saw Manny licking the stuff off his fingers. Manny. Lick, lick. Roderick. Ah! Once Roderick figured out what had happened and calmed down, we cleaned up the inside of the minivan with some paper towels. Then Dad turned the car around and drove back to the highway. At the next exit, there was a supermarket with an empty parking lot, so Dad pulled in for the night. We only had 4 reclining seats in the van and 5 people, so Mom volunteered Dad to sleep at the boat. I know Dad was looking forward to using his boat on the trip, but I'm guessing this was not what he had in mind. Brackety thing. Dad peeps out from under the tarp, and brackety thing. And we'll pick it up next time at Wednesday, because that was a lot of reading. And my fingers are wearing out. Anyway, hopefully you enjoyed that fun little session. It's quite the adventures they have, isn't it? Hopefully this time, when I turn this off, I don't lose the video, because that would be bad. Anyway, till next time, later.
Speech on. 1 hour, 46. Stop recording video. Button.
Ooh, it worked.
Swipe up or down to